Que bueno, mi gente. Calix Boxing here. Errol Spence Jr. versus Chris Algieri. I like this fight. There's a lot to like about this fight, and I like this fight because it makes sense. It's one of those fights that gets us somewhere. There will be questions answered in this fight. Errol Spence Jr. is a step up for him, a step up in class. He hasn't fought a guy of the class of Chris Algieri yet. And for Chris Algieri, it will hopefully get him back on track with the named opponent. For him anyway, I don't think it will, but for him, that's what he's thinking. Errol Spence Jr. 19-0, 16 KOs. Chris Algieri 21-2, 8 KOs. This will be at the Barclays Center, and Chris Algieri is the perfect stepping stone opponent, the perfect what should we say, gatekeeper opponent for an Errol Spence Jr. Just think about it. He has all the attributes of a gatekeeper type opponent. It's a gatekeeper type fighter. Doesn't have much power, but he doesn't get knocked out either. Has a heck of a chin. He's been in there with guys like Khan, Pacquiao, Provodnikov, guys who can punch, yet he hasn't been knocked out. The guy can take punches. Just look at the Provodnikov fight if you don't believe me. And look at the Pacquiao fight where he was knocked down multiple times and wasn't knocked out. So he has a chin. Yet, at the same time, he's not going to knock you out. Only 8 knockouts in 23 fights. He's feather-fisted. So for Errol Spence Jr., if you're Errol Spence Jr.'s handlers, you're looking at it like, oh, okay, he's not going to get touched up here. He's in there with Algieri. But this is a step up at the same time. This is a gauge for us to see where Errol Spence Jr. is at, and it's going to go rounds. You wouldn't think Errol Spence Jr. is going to knock out Chris Algieri, so he's going to get some experience here. As far as Errol Spence Jr. goes, what I like about both of these fighters is they're active. Spence Jr. has been pro for 3.5 years, and this is his 20th fight. He's been active. He fought, 4 or 5 times in 2015. Even for a prospect, that's a lot in boxing these days. It's a shame to say that, but it is. 26 years old. This seems to be coming into his own now, and a lot of people have been making him out to be this future of American boxing. He's given us, in past fights, some reasons to doubt him on that, and that's another reason why I like this fight. Is Algieri is a good gauge to see. You'll start to be able to paint that picture as far as who Errol Spence Jr. is in this fight, because it is a step up in class. He's a decent he's a decent defensive fighter from what we've seen so far. Decent hand speed, solid puncher, so we think anyway. We won't be able to tell until he steps up in class. 16 knockouts in 19 fights. We don't know yet because he's been fighting tomato cans, but this is a step up. I don't think he'll knock Algieri out, but it's going to get interesting because Algieri does have some boxing ability, great chin. He's going to stay in there with you, and he has decent footwork. He has a long reach. He'll be able to jab. It's kind of tough to counter him. So he has attributes. He has been in there with tougher opposition. Obviously, I named some of them: Amir Khan, Pacquiao, Provodnikov, Emmanuel Taylor, Arnudis. So he's been in there with guys, and he has more experience than the younger, rawer Errol Spence Jr. But it's no question that Errol Spence Jr. has more potential from what we've seen so far. So we think, but we'll start to develop that picture. Errol Spence Jr. 9th in the box rec rankings. Chris Algieri 11th. I give the edge to Errol Spence Jr. based off that talent and based off the fact that I don't know if Algieri would be the type of guy. If Spence is going to get exposed, I don't know if Algieri would be that guy, because I think it would be a bigger puncher who would expose him. I think Errol Spence Jr. can stay in there and box with Algieri, and Algieri won't be able to keep him honest in there with a lack of power. But once again, we need more fights like this in boxing to where we start to get answers. And hopefully they'll continue to develop Errol Spence Jr. this way, and after Algieri, he won't go back to fighting tomato cans and go backwards. Hopefully they can continue to progress him after that, and because Algieri is the perfect opponent for him right now. Just the perfect opponent to where we'll get those questions answered about Errol Spence Jr. And if he loses to Chris Algieri, I mean, that's full exposure at that point. If Errol Spence Jr. is everything they say he is, and look, I'm usually the guy that says, look, we need to be more forgiving with fighters. If they lose one fight, we need to be a little more forgiving. But at this point in your career, when you're being developed and you lose to a Chris Algieri. And nothing against Algieri, once again. He's a good fighter. He's a solid fighter. But he's a fighter who Spence should beat, especially if they say who he is. If he is who they say who he is, and a guy who's been getting good spar. We've been hearing stories about him sparring with top fighters and beating top fighters in sparring. We need to start seeing this in the ring, and we'll start to see the full picture, or part of the picture, on Saturday versus Chris Algieri. So I think Spence Jr. will win this fight on the scorecards, but Algieri will have his moments, and hopefully it ends up being a good, tight fight, man. I hope it's a close fight and we get something good, because Lord knows boxing needs that right now. So Spence Jr. versus Chris Algieri. Let me know what y'all think. Peace.